G'day guys, how's it going? My name is CJ and today we're going to be talking about a phone that isn't exactly new, but also isn't exactly popular either, despite it being a really solid phone as far as 2017 standards go. But before we get onto that, I just want to give a quick shout out to Videoblocks who sponsored this video. Videoblocks is one of the fastest growing libraries of stock video with over 3 million videos, After Effects, and motion backgrounds. What's even better is that there's a marketplace where you'll be supporting the independent artists who upload this footage, since it gives 100% of the commission back to them so they can keep shooting awesome footage for you and me. And the kicker with all of this is that the clips come with a royalty-free agreement so that you won't have to wake up in the middle of the night with people knocking on your door for copyright infringement. As part of this partnership, Videoblocks is giving away 7 days for you to try out this service, access this massive library and royalty-free licenses for free. Check out the links in the description below and start downloading. So anyway, I've had countless of people request a review for this phone, and I guess I can understand why, since it's quite often overlooked when we're talking about flagship smartphones. And I guess much of this is also down to the fact that the manufacturer has been recycling the same design for over 4 years now. What phone am I talking about? It is, of course, the Sony Xperia XZ Premium. Let's take a look. So we'll start with the design. Yes, it still looks like a classic Xperia smartphone. It's a well omni-balanced phone with a rectangular slab of metal and glass, and it's still a fingerprint magnet. It feels really good in the hand and sports a nice reassuring heft. It measures at 156 by 77 by 7.9 millimeters, so that means this is a big phone. Although its thickness is similar to other flagships like the S8 measuring at 8 millimeters, the Xperia's monolithic design means that the phone feels thicker than it actually is. Holding it in your hand lends it perfectly to its really great implementation of the fingerprint scanner. It's one of my favorites and it works really accurately and really quickly. Unless of course you're lucky enough to be living in the US where this feature is natively disabled for local models. It also sports the same massive top and bottom bezels, which is really old-fashioned for 2017 standards. But what that also means is that there's plenty of space to fit in dual front-facing stereo speakers. And whilst these speakers can push out a really good quality sound, it isn't exactly the loudest I've ever heard either. That being said, stereo speakers are a feature that seems to be going the way of the dinosaur thanks to the new in vogue obsession with bezel-less screens. And then speaking of the screen, your eyes get to feast on a 5.5-inch IPS LCD display that packs in a whopping 4K resolution. That's 820 pixels per inch of screen. That's a lot of pixels. However, Sony does end up scaling this resolution down to 1080p with general day-to-day use, and only really utilizing the full 4K resolution when there's content that actually supports it, like with Netflix, 4K videos on YouTube, or Amazon Prime. There's really no native way for it to change to full 4K, although there are some workarounds, and I'll post a few links in the description below if you're interested. In any case, the display is beautiful, and it performs as well as you'd expect any IPS LCD screen to perform. And even though it's not a bezel-less screen with a huge screen to body ratio, it still has great viewing angles, it gets bright enough to use outdoors, and color accuracy is on point. It also comes into line with other 2017 flagship phones in being HDR10 compatible. Inside you have a spec sheet that mirrors pretty much every other flagship on the market today. It's got a Snapdragon 835, Adreno 540, 4GB of RAM, micro SD card expansion, and what this means is it flies. Apps load really quickly, multitasking is a breeze, and it actually feels like Sony has cranked up the speed of the transition in animations, which kind of makes it feel even faster than it probably is. Pretty similar to what you see in the OnePlus 5. But overall, Sony has done a great job at minimizing bloatware, and the overall experience is getting pretty close to stock Android. There's still a few duplicate apps present, and I'm not particularly fond of some of the icon themes that they've chosen for the system UI, but in terms of actual use, we're looking at performance that's beginning to rival the Google Pixel. And praise doesn't get any better than that, especially when we're talking about Android. It sports Android 7.1.1 and it looks to be pretty good at keeping its security patches up to date, Whether or not it gets Android Oreo on the other hand, remains to be seen. Then moving on to the benchmark of a truly great smartphone, the camera. Sony has really tried to push its multifaceted credentials by utilizing various technologies from the different divisions. And with the success of their alpha mirrorless cameras, they'd be silly not to. It sports a 19 megapixels in-house sensor that's paired with a disappointingly small f2.0 standard angle G lens. It doesn't have OIS, and the trade-off means that you're probably going to be expecting fairly average low-light photography. It's by no means a bad camera for low light, it just doesn't really match its competitors in similar situations. When using intelligent auto with no real adjustments, photos can come out fairly soft and over-processed in low light. But if you take some time to dial in manual mode and dial in the right settings, you do get some fairly impressive shots. Otherwise, in most situations with intelligent auto, the Xperia does a really great job at capturing colors and scenes with really nice detail. That being said, I have noticed that the white balance does tend to favor cooler tones. Whether or not you like that is down to preference, but for me, phones like the S8 or the iPhone tended to represent the scene a little more accurately. Now talking about video, the XZ Premium does shoot at 4K at 30 frames per second, but bewilderingly, in order to access 4K, you have to launch a separate app from within the native camera app, and that already is 2 steps too many. That being said, the quality of the video itself is quite good, and the electronic stabilization does a decent job at keeping the video nice and smooth without making it look too unnatural. However, the biggest feature with video in terms of this phone is actually its slow motion capabilities, being able to shoot at 960 frames per second. Now, as you'd expect with such a high frame rate, resolution isn't exactly going to be the highest, running at 720p, and you also need a decent amount of light to get an image that's worth using. Combine this with the fact that the footage is taken over a fraction of a second with a fairly decent buffer in between shots. So what this means is you're going to need a bit of practice in order to nail the shot. However, when you do nail the shot, it ends up being a really fun feature to have. Just don't expect to use it professionally. Then one of the most underrated features of the whole Xperia line is the fact that it has a dedicated camera button. I do miss the days where you had Nokias and Sony Ericssons that had dedicated shutter buttons. It kind of made you want to go out and shoot more, and it actually made taking photos a lot more efficient as well. I mean, all you do is hold the camera button and then bang, the camera's good to go. But then what's the point of going out to shoot if the phone doesn't last? Well, in the Xperia, it's not really an issue. Despite it holding a 3230 mAh battery with a 4K screen, Sony's optimizations has meant that the Xperia Premium actually can still hold up to 4 to 5 hours of screen on time, and that's with my fairly standard, normal, moderate to heavy use. And even if you are running low, it does come with Quick Charge 3.0 if you need a little bit of a top up. And then finally, you have a couple of other cherries on top, like IP68 water resistance and an autofocusing 8 megapixel selfie camera, which actually is of a really decent quality and, dare I say, better than the Samsung Galaxy S8. Downsides, well, it's not exactly the cheapest flagship smartphone to date. Starting at 1100 Australian dollars, it's pretty hard to swallow when you know the OnePlus 5 is going to be selling in Australia for almost $500 cheaper. It's got a design that you either love or hate. I like it, but many of you will think it's old-fashioned. Overall, should you buy the Xperia XZ Premium? Unless having a 4K screen is an absolute must, and you really love the old-fashioned design, then go for it. It's still a really good phone. However, it doesn't actually do anything that groundbreaking and really doesn't do anything to differentiate itself from its competition, and it certainly doesn't do anything better than its competition either. When you consider that it starts at $1,100, you're really not getting much more value for your money compared to other phones like the S8, the U11, the iPhone 7 Plus, and especially the OnePlus 5. When you start to compare all these flagship smartphones with one another, it becomes much harder to recommend. But what do you think? Do you own an Xperia XZ Premium? Do you think it's worth it? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, give us a like, and if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Say good day, mum, for me. Cheers.